Representative, could you explain to the people at home why you told your caucus not to vote on a proposal to basically hold your pay if you didn't get a budget done? How can you explain that to the folks at home?
It's easy. It wasn't a serious proposal, right?
Well, wait a second. It was on the table. It was on the board. There was a vote. How can you call that not serious? Do the Republicans get credit for going over, as the chair of the House Appropriations Committee said, line by line? That's why it took so long to get here. I don't remember anybody in the budget process saying we went over every line in the budget looking for waste. Can you remember anybody saying that?
I don't know if they've said it, but I'm sure that there are people who have. I mean, those budget documents are thick and weighty, as I'm sure all of us who have accidentally gotten stuck with them can attest to. But I do think that, they really did look for some unconventional cuts, and that could work to their advantage. You're putting people on the spot to defend programs that maybe they've just kind of automatically been rubber stamping for years.
I will say, to your point, do they get credit for going line by line? I think the answer to that is yes. I think they do get credit for that because in the past, we've got this very scripted way to get a budget done. And really, these subcommittee chairs, just historically, have what, a month, 2 months to go through these budgets, and that's just enough time to have all these special interest groups come into your office and say why we need this program and that program. And they said, you know what, we're going to take our time and we're actually going to learn about this budget. I mean, they took the DHHS budget, which is a complete monster, chopped it into 3, and actually dug into it. I give them credit for that. I think that's actually probably not a bad idea. The roads has never been the Senate Dems' priorities.
We get so much more done on cuts if we could just get those Democrats interested in getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse.
Well,
and
he said the road package could have been higher.
Yeah, exactly.
Representative, could you explain to the people at home why you told your caucus not to vote on a proposal to basically hold your pay if you didn't get a budget done? How can you explain that to the folks at home?
It's easy. It wasn't a serious proposal, right?
Well, wait a second. It was on the table. It was on the board. There was a vote. How can you call that not serious? Do the Republicans get credit for going over, as the chair of the House Appropriations Committee said, line by line? That's why it took so long to get here. I don't remember anybody in the budget process saying we went over every line in the budget looking for waste. Can you remember anybody saying that?
I don't know if they've said it, but I'm sure that there are people who have. I mean, those budget documents are thick and weighty, as I'm sure all of us who have accidentally gotten stuck with them can attest to. But I do think that, they really did look for some unconventional cuts, and that could work to their advantage. You're putting people on the spot to defend programs that maybe they've just kind of automatically been rubber stamping for years.
I will say, to your point, do they get credit for going line by line? I think the answer to that is yes. I think they do get credit for that because in the past, we've got this very scripted way to get a budget done. And really, these subcommittee chairs, just historically, have what, a month, 2 months to go through these budgets, and that's just enough time to have all these special interest groups come into your office and say why we need this program and that program. And they said, you know what, we're going to take our time and we're actually going to learn about this budget. I mean, they took the DHHS budget, which is a complete monster, chopped it into 3, and actually dug into it. I give them credit for that. I think that's actually probably not a bad idea. The roads has never been the Senate Dems' priorities.
We get so much more done on cuts if we could just get those Democrats interested in getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse.
Well,
And
he
they
said
just
the
don't do
road
it.
package could have been higher.
Yeah, exactly.
Representative, could you explain to the people at home why you told your caucus not to vote on a proposal to basically hold your pay if you didn't get a budget done? How can you explain that to the folks at home?
It's easy. It wasn't a serious proposal, right?
Well,
I
wait a
think,
second.
like-
It was on the table. It was on the board. There was a vote. How can you call that not serious? Do the Republicans get credit for going over, as the chair of the House Appropriations Committee said, line by line? That's why it took so long to get here. I don't remember anybody in the budget process saying we went over every line in the budget looking for waste. Can you remember any of that? Anybody saying that?
I don't know if they've said it, but I'm sure that there are people who have. I mean, those budget documents are thick and weighty, as I'm sure all of us who have accidentally gotten stuck with them can attest to. But I do think that, you know, they really did look for some unconventional cuts, and that could work to their advantage. You know, you're putting people
Oh, this is great. And we have you're from the Michigan Advance. Welcome. What's your name? Catherine. Yeah. I approved your access. Thank you. Yeah, I personally approve those, you know. So we don't want any fake reporters on the floor. You know, Michigan Advance has actually done a pretty good job of covering me. This isn't your fault. There were a couple days there where they kind of went back to their roots, but overall they've been doing a pretty good job of covering me. And so when I saw your credentials, I approved you. And where are you from? You're from another state, aren't you? New Jersey? Great. Well, good for you. Well, welcome. This is, they aren't giving you the easy assignments when you start, are they?
I chose a really interesting time to start. So.
Yeah, they said we're bringing her right into Speaker Hall's press conference. So, well, that's good. Well, I guess you guys weren't at the bill signing. They just told me that, so I'm sorry. That, you know, Puri was there. Can you believe that? He had nothing to do with the budget, and he was there, and they don't let the press in. So, you know, I think there's going to be more, though. There's going to be more, and you guys, what?
Where
In Kalamazoo? You heard in Kalamazoo there's going to be one? We'll see. You know, so the Democrats like to operate in secrecy, so I don't want to violate anything because, you know, my style, as you know, is just to be very open, but the Democrats are very secretive, so I don't want to break anything that they aren't telling you yet. But I do know there's going to be more bill signings, and hopefully, see, here's the thing, all right? You guys and your colleagues, they don't get into the bill signing, and then they're going to amplify every single one of the other bill signings. That's what they're going to do. But, you know, those are calls that other people made. But I agree with you, there were people in the bill signing that should not have been in the bill signing, and then there were people that were not at the bill signing that should have been there. How about that? We can agree on that. But anyway, I just, now that we've had time to digest the budget, I just thought I'd come by and talk a little bit about it, and then, you know, we can take questions. But, you know, I think there was a lot in there, and some of you have been getting it right in your coverage. I really like what Bridge is saying. They're doing a really good job. I feel like Bridge is actually understanding what's in the budget, and others are kind of missing the mark, like the Detroit News. But overall, pretty good. And I give you credit to a lot of you were doing these interviews with no sleep, like Mr. Eggert, and no sleep, and you're having to say everything that was in this budget, and then they don't post them until like 3 days later. Do you notice that? So they post it, it's like 3 days later they post it, but you gave this interview like 5 hours after the budget passed, and you still did a pretty good job on that, David, honestly. It was pretty good on, which one was that? Was that mismatch or mishmash? So good job on there. So there's a lot of good things. And I think Midwesterner, you guys, I mean, you know, I didn't want to tell anybody that we eliminated the Poet Laureate, but I can't hide anything from the Midwesterner. It's gone. That was you know, you talk about waste, Poet Laureate, gone. There are a lot of things that got eliminated, a lot of waste, and I'll tell you, if there are any unhappy Democrats, and there are a lot of unhappy Democrats looking at this budget, losing their Poet Laureate, that was a tough one for them, but they still voted to do it because they know it was waste, just like many other things. You know, I think, you know, for us, I mean, we legitimately eliminated 2,001 ghost employees in this budget, something that the Democrats denied existed and very clearly existed. When you eliminate 2,001 positions and not one state employee is laid off, I think it proves our point. There were 2,001 ghost employees eliminated in this budget as part of our efforts to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse. And there's a much higher dollar figure attributed to this than a lot of the media is giving us credit for. You know, when we did this budget, we eliminated really $1 billion. There's about $1 billion less spent in this budget. But we eliminated that, and we dedicate it to roads, and then we dedicate the raised revenue to roads, dollar for dollar, and we're forcing cuts. And one thing the Detroit News did get right is a quote from Sarah Anthony: "We're going to have to make cuts next year." That's the way this budget is structured. Is not only did we make cuts this year, and we eliminated over $1 billion. Next year, the trajectory we're on is going to require even more cuts, hundreds of millions of dollars of cuts. And if you look at the outlook for the next 3 years, every one of those years is going to see an increased cut. And the reason for that is because we dedicated money that was currently going to departments and other things to roads. And they spent some of their one-time money, they drained some of the one-time money, and as they drain that one-time money, the future means they've got to use existing money to pay for the things they're currently paying for. So now they wanted to drain all of the one-time money, and I said, you know, you give the Democrats, I'm just saying, I know the Democrats better than probably anybody. I mean, I've been sitting in a room with these people for hours and hours and hours, and I know the Democrats, okay? And what I'll tell you is, the Democrats will spend every dollar available if you let them. And we wouldn't let them in the negotiations. They wanted to drain these slush funds. And I told you, there's $6 billion of slush funds in state government. It's part of the waste, fraud, and abuse. If we would have let them drain all $6 billion in this budget to patch all the cuts, they would have done it. But then you'd be looking at a big, big budget. You wouldn't be looking at a budget that's smaller in spending than last year. You'd be looking at a bigger budget. You'd be looking at a $90 billion budget. And so we wouldn't let the Democrats spend all the one-time money. But they did spend some one-time money. And because they're spending that one-time money, combined with dedicating all of the money that we did to roads, the trajectory, they don't have the money to keep spending at this sustained level. So what you're going to see when you look at these reports, and that's what Anthony was saying in the story, is going to be more cuts next year, drastic cuts, and more cuts the year after that. And so what we're doing is we're right-sizing this budget, we're getting value for your dollars, and we're setting priorities in state government, which needs to be, like I said, roads, public safety, and education. And a lot of these things that we looked at, we kind of viewed through the lens, right, is, you know, what gets the most value for your dollars. Now, I mean, the Democrats still shoved a lot of pork in there, and if you start looking at the names of the pork, and by the way, in the 26 budget, there's $168 million in earmarks in pork. I've heard all kinds of figures, but if you go to the 26 budget, that's what's in there. And that's a pretty considerable change from the past. If you look at 25 and how much money was spent on earmarks, it's over 1.3 billion. But in 26, it's 168 million. Democrats will try to confuse things and spin things, but it's a huge cut in pork. And ultimately, they were forced to make a choice between funding their pork and maintaining for one more year some of these programs and grants and things like that that have been going on under the Whitmer administration. In some cases, they funded their pork, and in some cases, like in the example of the Arts Council, they used their pork money to keep that program going, right? Now, when you get into next year, they're not going to be able to make that choice anymore because the one-time money lops off, and they're looking at significant cuts. So this is a trajectory we're moving on to eliminate further waste, fraud, and abuse in the budget next year. I just say heat is going to be permanent. You know, where that was part of our agreement. You saw the Democrats do some transparency in this budget, putting their earmarks on the screen before the vote. I understand why some people laughed at that. You should look at what their other ideas were on this. I mean, the Democrats were willing to shut down the government over not disclosing their pork. And that was ultimately the reason that these negotiations went on as long as they did. Having gone through this, I'll just tell you, we had adequate time to get this budget done. We were just at a standstill for a very long time over transparency of the pork spending and the Democrats' unwillingness to implement heat and to make earmarks transparent. They wanted to continue to shove billions of dollars in this budget without any disclosure. And when you hear Democrats like Anthony, and I saw Camilleri say this the other night, when Democrats try to say they led on this, that is laughable. And I hope that the media will amplify that is laughable. When they're saying that, what they're saying is their plan, which disclosed a year after the vote, was monumental transparency. That's what they're saying. Now, if you look at the rules that the Senate adopted and the things they've done before we forced them to implement heat, their plan was to disclose after the governor signed the bill. Okay. That was what was holding this up, is we didn't want the governor, we didn't want the heat, we didn't want transparency on the pork spending after the governor signed the bill. That means we would be learning about it sometime after today. What we wanted was for it to be disclosed before the vote. And Democrats, I mean, this is what caused the government to shut down for 4 hours, was that it literally took up until the brink to get the Democrats to agree to make heat permanent and to disclose their earmarks in the bill. And the Republicans, we never would have allowed a bill to go up for a vote that violated House rules. We would not have allowed that. I think the way forward on this deal was you do the transparency before the vote, you adopt heat as your rule in the Senate, and then we're going to make heat permanent in the law, and you're going to see that over the next couple weeks as heat becomes permanent in the law, so that next year and all future years there will be much more transparency on the secret pork spending, much better than what we saw this year. That was the path forward. And I think with the significant reduction in the pork spending and then forcing the politicians to put their name on it, disclose it, give us time to review it, so we know what is the project, who is the sponsor, what is the public benefit, when is it going to be complete, Is there other public money or private money that's affiliated with this? Those are all going to be important things for us to look at as we do this. I'll just say, having been there when this is going on, somebody sits in a room and rattles off 4 or 5 words and says, we would like to fund this program. And then you say, can you tell me what it is? And they look at you with a blank stare because they have no idea what it is. That's what this process has been up to this point. I mean, how helpful it was to have a sheet of paper that was a public document that had been public for months to show other parties to say, you know, this is the bridge in Trenton that we're trying to fix, or whatever it is. You know what I mean? You know how helpful that was? I mean, when we were going through this in the 25 supplemental, I mean, there were probably dozens of earmarks from when Tate was speaker that they got the language wrong. And I asked, why'd you get the language wrong? Well, we had to run this real fast at the end. Well, that kind of stuff isn't going to happen when you disclose early, you understand what it is, you have your ducks in a row, and it isn't just like, oh, hey, here's 5 or 6 buzzwords, we're going to put this in here. And then everyone says, okay, that whatever. Did you check it out? Oh yeah, I checked it out. And then you find out there's a lot more of the story. That's the way it used to work and the way it worked with the Democrats. That's not the way it should work moving forward. And as you see heat moving in the Senate and ultimately through the House, you'll see what an achievement that was. You know, I think it was really, I mean, you look at the way I see this year is, you know, we campaigned on fixing local roads. If you remember, when we walked off at the end of last year, we walked off over the sick leave, the tip credit, and roads. And what the Republicans said was, in ending the Democrat trifecta, was, if we're not going to fix these 3 issues, then why are we here? And I think with the culmination of this budget signing today, we can say roads was funded. We got almost $2 billion going to our local roads. And if you look at the way this is weighted, it's weighted to our local roads, and it benefits all districts, including the rural districts. There's some emphasis on fixing our critical bridges. You know, I've been trying to fix these critical bridges for years. We proposed to Joe Tate when he was speaker, why don't we just take money and fix all of our critical bridges instead of all this waste? And the worst are, it's like critical or closed. If it says closed, that's pretty bad. We should probably fix the ones that they classify as closed. And we really get some money up front to do that in this new formula, along with the local roads. So I kind of see this as everything that we stood up in that walk-off and made that stand about ending the Democrat trifecta, we've now gotten the Democrats to relent on and to do. And you know, it's been a success. I think we accomplished our 3 major objectives of the walk-off, which was sick leave, tip credit, and getting money to our local roads. And as we push this year, that's really what this whole year has been about, is fixing our local roads. And so Governor Whitmer and I drove that process. You know, I would say when I became speaker in the caucus in November, I talked about this. I came right out of that caucus into the scrum and said, I have a plan to fix the roads. And then the media wouldn't write about it, so I put my plan out. I actually showed it to you guys, and then you started writing about it because I was showing it all. And Governor Whitmer said I was the only legislative leader with the guts and the brains to put out a plan and pass it through their chamber. Well, she put out a plan too, right? We put out a plan. We challenged her to put out a plan. She put out some elements of a plan. And ultimately, that was where we had the menu from to put together this deal, which ultimately was, you want revenue, we'll give you revenue, but you need to agree to an equal amount of cuts of waste, fraud, and abuse, and we dedicate it all to roads. And that's what we did, and that's how we get our money into roads. It's been a long time goal of the Republicans to dedicate all of the money collected at the pump to roads. And we achieve that now with these bills being signed. That's critical. I think people were frustrated that we collected some of the highest gas taxes in the country, but one of the lower percentages of that money collected went to roads. Now all of it will go to roads. That makes sense to people. Electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids are going to be paying their fair share. That's important as we move ahead. Just looking through some other things in here. I will say about the ghost employees, there's a lot more ghost employees in this budget. We were only able to eliminate 2,000 ghost employees. I mean, we were kind of looking through the numbers, and you know, in these most recent numbers that we had, there were 55,000 FTEs, which are positions in government, and the latest governor's budget book said that 48,116 of those were filled. As we were going line by line with the Whitmer administration through us showing them these ghost employees and them kind of looking through things and finding them, we believe there's at least another 3,000 ghost employees in state government, even with us eliminating the 2,000 ghost employees. Originally, I thought there were 4,000 ghost employees. That went up to about 4,300 ghost employees. There's at least 5,000 ghost employees in state government. We just eliminated 2,000 of them. And so as we move forward in the next year, there's at least another 3,000 ghost employees that we're going to have to eliminate. Those are positions that are fake positions used to inflate spending lines and programs, but no job is actually attached to them. So we're going to keep going through that. I'll just point out, you know, I don't know what you guys can find and what you can't. So I'm just going to give you some of these highlights from this budget. We eliminated 896 ghost employees in the Department of Health and Human Services. We eliminated 449 ghost employees in the Department of Corrections, 280 ghost employees in the State Police, 62 ghost employees in the Treasury Department, 84 ghost employees in the Military and Veterans Affairs Department, 41 ghost employees in the Natural Resources Department, 38 ghost employees in the Labor and Economic Opportunity Department, and there's a lot more there to eliminate, just so you know. 15 ghost employees in EGLE, the Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy Department, which saw a pretty sizable cut in our budget. Cam Cavett did a great job on that one. We can go on and on, but there are a lot more ghost employees, and we're going to get to work eliminating those starting today, moving forward into the next budget. Some people think we should do the next budget earlier. If we're going to do it earlier, then we got to get to work on identifying and eliminating these ghost employees now. I think we are not getting enough credit from the press about the significant cuts that have been made to the Attorney General's office. And if you look at this office, it used to be primarily one line item, which is called operations. And we broke that into 34 line items. It was one of the hardest parts of the negotiation, but we broke it up into 34 line items, and then we forced the Attorney General's office to insert in those 34 line items what's going to be spent. That way, breaking it into things like consumer protection and things like that, breaking it up into those 34 lines, that's going to make it a lot harder for them to spend money on lawfare. And I look at it as more a 21% cut to the Attorney General's office. And you can't count anticipated payments for work that she may do for state departments. You can't count that. Some of you count that. You can't count that. And if the work comes from the departments, then they'll pay for it. But that's going to have to be legitimate work from the state departments. It can't be lawfare. Remember how this was structured before. it was mostly one line item called operations. Now it's broken into 34 lines that are very specific about the departments, and you can't count money that is given for additional payments for work that may or may not be needed from the state departments. It depends on what they're doing and the work. But I will say a lot of this lawfare and a lot of this what I would describe as suing President Trump, that's not work on the behalf of departments. So just as we're going through, I'll see if I had anything else. Oh, and you know, I'm very proud that we got Governor Whitmer to sign a bill that eliminates taxes on tips, overtime, and Social Security. You know, I know that Craig Mauger and others gave me a hard time when I pivoted onto that, and you know, I think with the situation of the One Big Beautiful Bill, when we looked at that and we knew, and this is what comes from doing the budget later and using later numbers and having a real budget, not a bloated, out-of-date, unbalanced budget like the Senate. When I was looking at those numbers, what I saw was we weren't going to get a deal done to cut the income tax and reverse the Democrat income tax hike. But I did think that I could make a compelling case to the Democrats that we could do no tax on tips, overtime, and Social Security. That was taking the budget from $700 million to $200 million a year. And I thought if we dug in on that we could achieve that, and we did. That did not come from the Democrats, that came from the Republicans. And that was really a result of looking at the numbers, seeing what was realistic, and digging in on that. I thought it was really critical that we delivered tax relief for working people, and that we amplified the working families tax cut that President Trump and the Republican Congress have put through, so that our tipped workers, our people working overtime, and also our seniors on Social Security have no tax on their state tax on tips, overtime, and Social Security. And that definitely was a big achievement of the Republicans, even though I was criticized for promoting it at the time that I did. It ended up being a significant win. If I would have told you that Governor Whitmer would sign a bill that eliminated 2,000 ghost employees and had no tax on tips, overtime, and Social Security, none of you would have believed me, but yet we achieved it. So I was pretty proud of that. I did want to talk a little bit about economic development. I do think that moving ahead, you know, I think we accomplished our goal here of not funding SOAR in this budget. That was important to our members. You know, SOAR has been a complete failure. You look at how many billions of dollars that we spent on SOAR, and we haven't created any jobs, I don't think, from SOAR. You look at Goshen and how that is linked to the Chinese Communist Party. It's not a good program. It's been a failure, and we did not fund it in this budget. We lapsed money from it to make it go away. And ultimately, we need to work to eliminate it. So our next goals as we move ahead toward the end of the year are to eliminate SOAR and to eliminate the mega credits. And we're going to continue to move ahead to do those things. Now, you know, there's some ideas that Governor Whitmer has. You know, she's looking at some ideas. I know Mike Hoadley has introduced a bill on hire, something that he's been working on for a long time. And essentially, you know, how can we end the days of the cash giveaways once and for all and put a stake in them? How can we, as we move ahead, end these mega credits, which were just paying corporations for years and years and years, hundreds of millions of dollars to not create any new jobs? it's like with GM. I don't remember the number because I'm not as fresh on it today as I was last time we talked about it, but it's like, as long as you don't lay off 15,000 people, you get paid how many, what is it, 300 million a year or whatever people estimate. That's ridiculous. You know, we can't have incentives that say, unless you lay off 15,000 people, you won't get hundreds of millions of dollars from the state of Michigan. Those are terrible deals that Jennifer Granholm made. They're terrible deals. And we need to end those programs. We need to end MEGA and SOAR. You know, I'll just say, like, we put some faith in Quentin Messer, and he didn't land any of the right deals, and we've not created any jobs, and we need to end it. That's why we defund it here. And that's why I'm going to move ahead before the end of the year to try to eliminate SOAR and MEGA. Now, Governor Whitmer has some ideas, and I've committed to working with her on those ideas to see if we can eliminate SOAR and MEGA, what could we do moving forward? And I mentioned Mike Hoadley has a bill that he's been working on. And the idea is, you know, I believe that we want Michigan to be a place where we can attract jobs, right? We want to create high-paying jobs. We do. But we can't do this anymore where we're just writing checks up front and no one performs and they get to keep the money. We need to make deals that are great deals for the people of Michigan, and those deals need to be based on they perform, they do the things that they say they're going to do, and then we reimburse them in some way. Now, we need to iron out details, and we're going to do that with Mike Hoadley and Mark Tisdale and others who've been looking at this stuff. We got to iron out details. We got to figure out exactly what the right approach is for Michigan, but I'm committed to working with the governor and trying to do something before the end of the year that eliminates SOAR, eliminates MEGA, and comes up with something that can help Michigan compete with other states, but allows us to make great deals that actually perform with jobs for the taxpayers, and ends this era of where the politicians write checks to corporations that have no loyalty to Michigan and create no jobs. We've seen far too much of that under our two Democrat governors, and we're going to work to change that moving forward. So I did want to address that. I know David had a story on that, and thought I'd address it. And like always, David is on top of things. It's amazing. I don't know if you got people everywhere, David, but I'll take questions now. Yeah, you had your hand up over here. Did you have a question, or are you good? Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, look, we were eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse in this budget. We cut over $1 billion. This is a smaller budget than last year. The general fund spend is down considerably in this budget, and we were dedicating the money to roads and infrastructure. In a budget where you're cutting, it's hard to stick large economic development programs in that budget, and so the copper mine didn't make it. I know, Ed McBroom and Greg Markkinen and David Preston and Carl Bonak and others are working on that, and I support their efforts as they continue to work on it. Did you have your hand up? Yeah.
Besides the budget now that's passed, what other issues do you think the House and Senate and government can collaborate on to pass?
Well, I think that the number one is going to be trying to resolve I want to see the elimination of SOAR and the MEGA credits. We defunded SOAR in this budget, but I want to take it further and eliminate SOAR. I don't think, let's just be clear. The Democrats will not win the House, not with me in charge, but when they had the House before, you saw them spend a lot of money in SOAR. And so we need to just eliminate SOAR altogether. We need to eliminate it. And so we defunded it, but now we're going to move further and eliminate SOAR. And we're going to try really hard to eliminate the mega credits too. And we're going to work with Governor Whitmer and try to find a way to, along the framework that Mike Hoadley and Mark Tisdale have been working on Mike Hoadley's bill, see how we can come up with a tool that Michigan can compete and land great deals. So we want to compete and we want to land great deals, but we want to land high-paying jobs. We don't want to land low-paying jobs. Like you look at the Marshall deal, what did they pay? I mean, what was it, $1.8 billion or whatever it was, and they got, at the time it was for what? It was like 2,400 jobs that paid under $48,000 a year on average, and now since then, you know, the Michigan Strategic Fund meets constantly, and they scale it down and they push it out. The Michigan Strategic Fund should not be able to take something we agree to and then just shake it up and change it all the time. That was one of the reasons why SOAR was a failure, is you do SOAR and then the Michigan Strategic Fund can just come in and change everything after the fact once they get the money. That's why we need to get rid of SOAR. But what we need is something where we really prove that they're creating the jobs they say they're going to do, and that they're higher paying jobs than what we would have otherwise. Because why would you pay for jobs that are less than the average? That doesn't make any sense. You don't need to pay for jobs that are less than the average wages. If you're going to pay, you should pay for the high paying jobs, and it should only be after performance. And so if we can come up with something like that along the lines of what Mike Hoadley is introduced and what Mark Tisdale's been working on, then, you know, we're going to try to see if we can do that before the end of the year. I don't see a lot of room to do much else. I think that's pretty much it. And then you will see heat become permanent as well. Beth?
Are you, I know you said Hoadley is working on that fire bill. Are you also open to uncapping the transformational brownfield credit?
I don't think so. I'm still looking at it, but, you know, we're looking at it, and, you know, I think this is going to take precedence. I think this will take precedence over that.
Even with pressure from Dan Gilbert to pass that transformational brownfield?
I couldn't hear you.
Even with pressure from Dan Gilbert to pass that transformational brownfield?
Yeah, even with that pressure, I think this is taking precedence. You know, if we're going to defund SOAR and hopefully eliminate SOAR and hopefully eliminate the mega credits, then this conversation is going to take precedence over other conversations. I mean, you've heard Governor Whitmer talk about, you know, how we need tools to land deals. You know, you've heard President Trump talk about, you know, how he wants to help us land big deals, and we have to have the tools. But we've got to do it in a smart way where we actually benefit Michigan taxpayers, and SOAR and mega credits are not the way to do that. So we've got to look and see whether we can come up with something different, similar to what Tisdale and Hoadley have been doing. And I believe Hoadley has a bill that's been filed that, you know, you can look at. But that's really where we have to focus our efforts. You know, I don't see an urgency at this time to look at transformational brownfield. Yeah.
The new budget mentions that there's going to be a required review of the voter file from the Secretary of State.
Yeah.
Can you just kind of walk through what that looks like and if there are any penalties if they fail to do that review?
Yeah, so Ann Bullen knows all the ins and outs of this, but the Auditor General, which is independent of the governor, you know, the Auditor General is part of the legislative branch, will be able to conduct an audit of the procedures of the elections. So it isn't going to be an audit of like is every name on the voter roll a dead person or an alive person? But it will be an audit of basically how are they checking for dead people? Are they checking if people moved out of state? Are they following all the best practices and laws according to those things? And if they're not, that will come out in that audit, which I believe is due by September of next year. That's a pretty big movement from what you would expect the Democrats to agree to. And you know, we can get the Auditor General to audit whatever we want, but the fact that they agreed to that, all parties agreed to that, I think was pretty significant. Yeah, Colin.
The initial road plans were about $3 billion. This budget was less than $2 billion. How do you plan to make up for that missing funding in the years?
Yeah, and the reason why the roads plan was this, and look, I mean, this is still the biggest roads deal that's ever been made, and it'll get up. You know, it's about 1.86 million, I think, where it'll go, which is close to 2 billion. I think that for us, the reason it wasn't a bigger deal is because the Democrats were not willing to cut more waste, fraud, and abuse. I told the Democrats, I'll match you dollar for dollar, but you have to cut waste, fraud, and abuse, and this is as high as we could get them to go. Now, House Republicans have exposed over $3 billion of waste, fraud, and abuse in the budget. It was actually $5 billion of waste, fraud, and abuse we found in the budget. There's all kinds of more ghost employees. There's all kinds of programs. Even some of the pork projects that did get funded are clearly waste, fraud, or abuse, or maybe all three. But those ones came from the Democrats. We didn't eliminate all waste, fraud, and abuse in this budget, and this is going to be a process that'll continue. Now, fortunately, I'll be Speaker for another 5 years, so I can eliminate all of the waste, fraud, and abuse. But unfortunately, that was as far as Democrats were willing to go, so we weren't going to give them any more revenue. Yeah.
Going back to the Wakefield Township project, can you talk about if there's any future for that project and future budget negotiations and what your thoughts are on its chances of this?
Well, yeah, I think it continues to be a topic that will be discussed, but it wasn't in this budget.
Well, where did it fall on the priority list? Like you said, in a budget that's being cut, economic development isn't necessarily a priority. So where did it fall in that list of things that were included? Like, was it the first to be cut or last?
Well, there's a size, right? So this was a $50 million ask. And, you know, I mentioned how the earmarks were significantly reduced. And so, you know, you can look at all of the things that the Republican members put in there, and those are just easier to do. They're easier to do when it's 2 million or 3 million than it is to do when it's 50 million. You looked at how we cut the business attraction fund basically in half. We defunded SOAR. There were a lot of things that were done in there to cut funding for economic development and for the MEDC, which under Quentin Messer hasn't been doing very well with those funds. And so for that reason, there wasn't just $50 million sitting around to give to Quentin Messer to use one of these existing tools to give to a copper mine in the Upper Peninsula. Even though the project has merit and our members support it, that just wasn't, you know, we were cutting the business attraction fund, we were cutting LEO, we were cutting MEDC. There just wasn't, that isn't a budget where you can just shove a $50 million project in for a copper mine. And I guess I would say the cuts to MEDC had more value than the value that the copper mine had. Even though the copper mine has value, eliminating the business attraction fund funding we did, which has been wasted, eliminating funding for SOAR, draining parts of SOAR, those were higher priorities, even though the copper mine was a priority and is important to some of our members.
To piggyback off of that a little bit more, you know, this was something that was kind of left behind
I would just say, like I said, I mean, we were cutting funding for MEDC, and, you know, the role of these activists had nothing to do with it. It had nothing to do with the Democrats. This budget was cutting MEDC, eliminating funding for SOAR, and cutting the Business Attraction Fund in half. So there just aren't the tools to do that in this budget. You know, there's going to be future conversations on economic development, like I laid out, under a new program that we're going to look and see if we can create this year. And I think the conversations about Copperwood continue, and it's very much alive, but we just couldn't get it in this budget. Yeah, Simon.
There is a provision in the budget that will take control of IT systems that are managed by the Department of State, transfer this to DTMP. Here's we can talk about intent there.
Oh yeah, no, that's good. You know, there's so many things that I achieved in this budget with Ann Bolin, and I'm not even talking about them all. That's how many there are. So what the Democrats do is they take maybe the 4 or 5 things that they think they want on, and they spin them all to you guys and then get you to write stories. I'm not even talking about them. That's how many there are. There's no question in my mind that the Republicans won this negotiation, and we did it with only one of the 3 legs of the stool, which I give our members credit for. We did it because we were very unified, and we knew exactly what we wanted to achieve, and we prioritized the things we wanted to achieve in the negotiations. I still don't know what the Senate Democrats were attempting to achieve in the negotiation, other than trying to shove as much pork in it and not tell anyone who was behind it. That seemed to be their only objective in the negotiations. But with that said, yeah, I mean, we're going to, I mean, we saw what a disaster Jocelyn Benson's IT programs were. I mean, Winnie Brinks called me and asked me, will you pass a bill to extend this deadline because Jocelyn Benson screwed up the IT so bad? And I did that. We did that for her. We extended the deadline because she asked me to. And I think they were Senate bills that we moved. So it was pretty much a consensus. Yeah, let's not put her in charge of IT anymore. If she's going to have an IT program, she needs to come to us, and then we'll decide whether we're going to give her the ability to do it or not. They call that a lockbox, and that IT is in a lockbox, and she's going to have to justify what she's doing and show us a plan. And that was a big deal that Ann Bolin got done in the budget. She did a great job on that. You know, I think some of that stuff will come out in coming days. You know, there's some things. Some of it is traditional things that are in there that are always viewed unenforceable. I think there's 3 or 4 things. I have no reason to believe that's unenforceable. Yeah, I'm back.
So that state budget also includes universal meals for private schools. How is that decided, and do you expect any legal challenges from it?
Yeah, well, Tim Kelly did a great job on the education budget, and you know, one thing that I just want to make clear, we were not opposed to free school and lunch. I mean, free breakfast and lunch. We were not opposed to that. We had a different way of funding it, but I was never opposed to that, and a lot of the Republicans were very clear that we wanted to continue the program, and the program would continue. I think what Tim Kelly heard from the Democrats was they said all students. Well, that includes private schools too. And so I think he was able to secure that, because if the Democrats are saying all kids, then why is that only some kids? And I think ultimately they were persuaded by his point, and you saw all schools included in the free breakfast and lunch. And I thought Tim Kelly did a good job with that. Yeah.
Yeah, are you concerned about criticisms from the business world about the decoupling of the federal and state tax?
No. Did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, do you know when the numbers will be available for the amount that cities, townships, and counties are going to be getting through
What's your question?
When will numbers be available for the amount that cities, townships, and counties will get through the road steep?
You have it?
Yeah.
We have it now?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah, Gideon has it now. That's how good we are. The governor signed the bill and I have the numbers. You'll make sure they get it? Okay. Do you know Gideon back here? He's our comms guy. Great. Yeah, he'll give it to you so you can have it. But when you see these numbers, you're going to see they're really good for a lot of the Republican districts. They're really good.
Could you elaborate a little bit more on the conversations you had with businesses about decoupling as they came out very strongly against this prior to that passing?
Well, a lot of these business groups support Democrats. Some of them even endorse Gretchen Whitmer. So, you know, I guess that's what you get when you support Democrats is policies like that. I mean, you look at the Republican plan. The Republican plan was to eliminate $3 billion of waste, fraud, and abuse. We showed how we could do that and fix the roads. You know, some of these groups wanted to shift that onto working people. It's very easy around here for people to say, well, let's just raise taxes on working people. Let's raise gas tax. Let's raise registration fees because actual working people and seniors don't have lobbyists. That's really easy for them to say. These groups were among the loudest that we needed to fix the roads. We have a Democrat governor that many of them supported and Democrat legislators that many of them supported, and this is what you get when you have Democrats. I think we made the best deal we could, and ultimately we won the negotiations. But you know, they don't like my position on getting rid of the mega credits either, and you saw our members vote, almost every member of our caucus voted to get rid of the mega credits. And I've looked at this, the ones that get the mega credits and the ones that are affected by decoupling, they overlap a lot. I'll just tell you that. They overlap a lot. And so we stood up to those interests when we did the mega credits, and, you know, we're doing what we can. I mean, those groups didn't want us to shut down the government. They wanted us to fund roads. And some of them supported Gretchen Whitmer and other Democrats, and so we had to negotiate. But I'll say the things that I cared the most about, like actually fixing our local roads, not having fee increases. And one thing we're never going to have is increases in our hunting and fishing fees. We're never going to have that as long as I'm Speaker. You don't see fee increases in this budget. I blocked any effort to increase gas tax or registration fees on hardworking Michiganders, and I delivered them no tax on tips, overtime, and Social Security, so that our Michigan workers and seniors are going to have even more tax relief than what President Trump was giving them. I look at it and see we put record funding into education. We're doing the free breakfast and lunch. We restored the school safety and mental health funding. That was a big issue on the campaign. Democrats cut that 92%, and we restored every dollar of it like we said we were going to do when we were campaigning. We're bringing back state workers. That's something I don't get enough credit for. We're bringing state workers back to work, and we're ending the leases. We're ending the leases. And so by bringing more state workers back to work and ending leases for empty buildings, we're raising these occupancy rates to 80%. And I'll just tell you, the swipe card data I have, which is a lot more than you guys have, I finally got some of it. The occupancy rates are much lower than that. So they're going to have to end some leases, and they're going to have to bring some workers back. Now, you heard the governor say, you know, the departments are going to work through that, but more state workers are coming back to work, and we're going to save taxpayer money by reducing these leases. And then the Public Safety Trust Fund, you know, when we did the walk-off, you know, that was a commitment that I made to Karen Whitsett that we were going to get that Public Safety Trust Fund done, something Joe Tate couldn't do when he was Speaker. And we got it done, and we're making those investments in the cities with the highest crime rates to help them continue to reduce their violent crime rates. That's making Michigan safer, and it's the first time in Michigan's history where the state is making those investments directly in our local police departments to help them with equipment they need and to hire more police to do the job. So, you know, these were all major accomplishments by the Republicans, and our priorities were public safety, education, and fixing the roads. Those were our priorities. And Democrats tried to tell you that you had to pick between fixing the roads and funding education. I always said we didn't have to, we could do both, and in this budget we did. Those were our priorities, and decoupling helped us accomplish those priorities. Yeah, Beth.
Senate Majority Leader asked for $100 million for that RSC score.
Mm-hmm.
It was given by the end of the night, 250. Well, can you talk about the negotiations that
Yeah, my understanding of that, and that's something that I've looked at since I last talked to you. My understanding of that is, number one, this is in the 25, not the 26. Number two, the way it's structured, it could be given to someone other than them. I think the money goes to Michigan State, and then they have to do an RFP and figure it out. So I can see that the Senate Majority Leader wants to influence this by talking about it and trying to steer it to RX kids. That's not the way it's written in the bill.
Are you aware of another program that does that?
I'm not that familiar with it, but I know that I think it goes to prenatal care. Is that right? In the and I know and it goes to Michigan State.
I believe it's like a flat payment.
Yeah, I think I saw something about prenatal care and Michigan State, or maternal care and Michigan State. Look, I mean, they're trying every trick in the book to shove stuff in this budget, and this is an example of it. And by making heat permanent, we're not going to have this anymore. So there's all kinds of tricks these guys did, and that might be one of them. But we really cut a lot of that out of this budget. I mean, you guys saw how many different ways they tried to shove pork into this budget and try to get that number back to 1.3 billion where it was last year. You wouldn't believe it. And if that's a kind of sneaky way to slip that one through, the way it's worded is it goes to MSU. There's some criteria, and my understanding is it'll be bid out. That's my understanding. So, you know, we're dealing with a very dishonest group of people that are just trying to shove pork in this budget. You wouldn't believe it, what they tried to do. Yeah.
Are you willing to take up an export or any other legislation to grow the cannabis industry involved in that wholesale tax increase?
What'd you say?
Are you willing to take up export legislation or anything else to grow the cannabis industry involved in this off the law?
Yeah, so we looked at hemp. What we're working on, I would say, is coming to a consensus on how much revenue that would bring in. It's kind of a hard thing to project. There's a wide swing of how much revenue that could bring in, and for that reason, I didn't put that forward as an option. So I think we can continue to look at that. But there's not an easy way to determine how much money that raises. So as I'm proposing, we're going to do one-to-one cuts to waste, fraud, and abuse to revenue. When you have something as volatile as that, it's hard to project how much cuts you need to make. And so that wasn't part of it. Yeah, David. Yeah, I would say that it's not a priority to accomplish at this time, and I wouldn't 100% rule it out. It's just the higher priority is going to be figuring out what to do when we repeal SOAR, and if we repeal MEGA, which I'm going to push pretty hard to repeal MEGA if we can repeal both of those, we're going to need a tool. And how do we construct a tool that that's going to help us make great deals for the state of Michigan and not these bad deals that our last two Democrat governors have been making?
Just to follow up on the mega portion, when you say you repeal the mega, are you referring to trying to get that claw money back from the companies that are still supposed to get some credits in the next handful of years?
I would say that, my goal is to repeal mega, and, could you structure some kind of incentive here where they would agree to that?
I wanted to ask a little bit more about brownfield as well. You mentioned that the governor has discussed some of her ideas for tools around mountain development. Has she indicated that brownfields might be a direction that she wants to head in, and is that going to be a point of negotiation?
That's not something her and I have discussed. I've talked to her about hire or something similar like what Mike Hoadley has introduced. And how can we come up with something that accomplishes our goal of making great deals for the state? But we can't get ripped off anymore. I mean, SOAR, MEGA, we've been ripped off by these programs, and we need to structure a new program that we can make great deals with, and that our governors won't be ripped off by these corporations anymore. I mean, we want high-paying careers. We want to attract high-paying careers and industries to Michigan. We want to help give the governor and President Trump the tools they need to land big deals and great deals in Michigan. But we've got a lot of work to do because we have to really come up with something that's actually going to accomplish that, and a lot of these Democrat proposals won't do it. And we need to look at, Mike Hoadley and Mark Tisdale and some of these folks that have been working on it for a long time and see what exactly we can do that'll help us land great deals and spend taxpayer dollars wisely. Yeah.
Do you have any details about what might be in that upcoming job creation legislation? What kinds of things you're pushing for?
We're not going to be paying cash up front. And we're not going to give the Michigan Strategic Fund the ability to change everything all the time. Those two things I know, but we're going to have to start getting to work on ironing out the rest of the details. Is Hoadley's bill out there or not? I keep talking about it, but I've seen it, so I don't know if it's been introduced or not. I think it's been introduced, but he has a bill on this that he's been working on for quite some time, and hopefully it's out there. Yeah.
So, the $100 million retirement fund offset was also removed, and some education advocates are claiming that it will impact classroom spending. Do you have any comment to that? And also, is there a long-term solution for teacher administrative retirement costs?
Yeah, I keep getting asked about that. That was something that I don't apply the same significance to that some others are applying. So that whole MIPSR thing never got to my level. I think that was something that was resolved at the lower levels, so I'm not that up to speed on it. I just know that we put together record funding for schools. There were some really good things. I mean, I know Gina Johnson had been talking for a while about incentives for class sizes. There were some Republican ideas on, how to give bonuses to teachers. And so you saw Kelly and Camilleri work through some of those things and kind of come up with compromises that accomplish those goals of, pools of funding for more bonuses for teachers, for smaller class sizes, record funding for schools. And then you saw, school safety and mental health funding restored. You saw parity for private schools and public schools on school safety, mental health, and also free breakfast and lunch. And then you saw parity with cyber charters, which is always a contentious issue. So there were a lot of good things in the budget. You know, the retirement stuff wasn't an area where things changed too much. Any other questions? Covered it all? All right. Well, thanks. Hopefully I gave you guys something to write about. I try to do that every week, especially since I'm the only one that'll talk to you. So, all right. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you guys at the press bill signings. All right.